Good man. Welcome to Unfinished, where we, the over 50, declare that we are absolutely not finished. We talk about health, we talk about new starts, new businesses, new relationships. We explore how we live the rest of our lives intentionally. Super excited today, joined by Adie. Adie and I know each other. We go to the same gym. And I'm really excited because I have no idea what we're going to talk about. Absolutely no idea. Adie's been through some challenges, and through that had a discovery, an insight, an epiphany, an awakening, whatever you want to call it, which Adie's going to walk us through. So this is an authentic conversation, as a podcast should be. There's no pre-alignment. There's no pre-discussion. I'm as excited to figure out what it is we're going to work out. So, Adie, be good if you did an intro to yourself, and then probably the best place to start is talk a little bit about the challenges that you've been through, and then we'll take it from there. Yeah, but welcome, man.
It's nice to be here. Yeah, I suppose it's the first time I've heard the full intro to what the podcast is, so it's quite I'm excited to see your reaction. This is obviously the first time I've spoken publicly about this, especially outside of family. So I suppose, like most men my age, I've spent the last 30 years living in the corporate world. I've done effectively digital transformation the entirety of my life. It's all I've ever done. It's all I've ever known. It's all I've ever loved. I think, like most people, I realised I've been enduring it for the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, that was my realisation.
The enjoyment has definitely gone. I suppose I realise I use a lot of terms that are relative to me, but not necessarily relative to others. But I think, like most people in that corporate world, I had, imposter syndrome. I felt the pressure, the stress. I had anxiety. And I think, for me, I just put that down to the fact that I was always presenting. I was always doing board meetings, so I sort of rationalized it from that point of view. Probably about 10 plus years ago, I was formally diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And I went through the traditional routes, medication didn't work for me, got off that, didn't change anything, did CBT, did traditional therapy, and they sort of made things a little bit better, but overall they didn't change anything. 4 years ago, obviously, like yourself, I discovered CrossFit, and I realized that probably did the best for my mental health and for anxiety. So then fast forward to 2 months ago, I was at the point in my career where, as you kind of alluded to, I sat there going, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I think I don't think it was necessarily mortality. It was just more, I just felt like I was having a half-time rest and was just reassessing my life and just thought I've done everything for everyone else and not for myself. So I classically put my CV into a well-known AI tool and just said, I'm 50. If I want to start my life again right now, what could I do but not start from the bottom? And it came back and it said, you should be a coach or a therapist, or number 2, you should do transformation. And I just thought, a coach? I just never thought it. So, I mentioned it to my wife, I mentioned it to a few friends, and they were like, oh yeah, you'd be a really good coach. And I was just like, I've never seen it, but that's fine. And I was like, but transformation? I wanted something, helicopter pilot, I wanted something else to justify it. And I kind of, did the classic adult thing, and I've just left it and ignored it. And then I suppose my rational brain just went, well, I've given it a loaded question. So I've given it my CV, so obviously it's going to return what I've done.
Context, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I just thought, well, given I've spent 30 years in the corporate world, I have so many, psychometric tests, leadership, behaviorship, Myers-Briggs, everything, 30 years worth of information. So I just thought, right, let's take advantage of this amazing AI. So I uploaded all of that,
Wow.
And then I basically asked it the same question.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
50 years old,
yeah.
you know, I want to, you know, what should I be doing? In my head, I was thinking it was more like, you know, when you're a kid at school and you'd fill out the form and the careers assessment then goes, oh,
I'm going to come back to
you
that
should be
point
this, you
because
know.
there's something wrong with that. But yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
talk about
But
that.
then, you know, so that's the way I thought about
Yeah.
it. So I did that, and it came back and it said, you should be a neurodivergent coach or a therapist, or you should do transformation consultancy. And my first thought was, a coach again? You know, what's going on here? And then the second one was a transformation consultant. I was like, well, that's what I've already done. So I thought, well, that's kind of reassuring because at least I've kind of stumbled into a career that suits me. So I just said to it, you know, why? And I refer to it as it because for me it was, you know, I was just like, it makes no sense to me. You know, why do you think now? And it said, well, you know, because of your neurodiversity. And I was like, am I neurodiverse? And it basically said, and I'd never heard the expression. It said your 2E is twice exceptional. And I'd never heard the term ever in my life. Never heard the term. So I, you know, obviously said, well, what does that mean? And it said you're gifted and challenged. And obviously being, I suppose, British, me, and I was like, what do you mean I'm challenged? You know, and it basically said you've got a neurodivergent profile, probably dyslexia. And I immediately went, well, I don't have dyslexia because I can read and write. And I went, what's this gifted bit? And for me, you know, when I think about gifted people, I think about gifted musicians, you know, mathematicians. And I suppose that's the very classical sense of gifted.
It's how we condition through our schooling.
Yeah. It's
You're
what the system.
As a musician, a sports person, or an academic.
Yeah. So, and I was like, okay, so how am I gifted? And it came back and it just said, you know, on the 5 personality scores, you've got 98th and 99th percentile on all of them, which is rare. On this intensities test, out of the 5, you're high on all of them. Most people are high on 1 or 2, maybe 3. I was like, okay, but that's just sort of personality things. You know, that doesn't mean anything. And then it said, based on all of the scores you've done, it's like you're in the top 1% for cognitive reason, pattern recognition, cognitive stuff. And my brain kind of went back. So 10 years ago, working for corporate, you know, environments, I did a test. And because the company was such a global company, they did a test where they realized that most of the people doing the test English would not be their native language.
Yeah.
So they did this test. And I got 99th percentile on it. And I didn't know what that meant. I genuinely didn't. I immediately thought, damn, I was so close to 100, right? But I didn't realize that actually that means that in a room of 100 people, 99 did worse than you.
Yeah.
So I am that 1%.
Yeah.
And then I then Googled saying, you know, who does these tests? And there's 2 reasons you do that test. One, again, for corporates where English isn't your native language. The second one, IQ test for dyslexics. And I literally was like goosebumps. And again, I think it's probably more a reflection of me. I could relate more to the negative stuff than the positive things.
Yeah.
You know, if 100 people give you a compliment, you ignore it. If one person says even anything, you know, you latch onto it.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's really bizarre. So I sort of got obsessed then about what could I, you know, feed this model of myself that wasn't just my perspective. So I started adding in, you know, I was formally diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And I just started adding in all these little quirks that I know are fundamentally me.
Yeah.
And my wife, you know, sometimes begrudgingly and sometimes smilingly confirmed the things that I entered. And it came back and it just said, 100%. It obviously said you potentially have some autism and you potentially have some ADHD. So I went down this sort of route of learning everything about the diagnostic criteria for this and sort of self-diagnosing. But then I realised I ticked one of the first tick boxes for this twice exceptional, which was like hyper focus.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, and literally, you know, I just gathered within 3 or 4 days, I'd gathered so much information. It was ridiculous. So I thought, right, I need to sort of understand this. So I spoke to a friend who their daughter has autism.
As does my son.
So I thought I'll have a talk to them and see if it helps me understand. And ironically, it made me realise that actually they didn't really know anything about autism at all. They were supportive and helpful and said, you know, it makes sense, but it didn't serve me in any way. I know that sounds horrible, but it didn't give me the information I needed. But they'd suggested that there was a documentary that the BBC had done on autism, and there was one on ADHD and there was one on dyslexia, and I thought, brilliant, I'll watch that, see if anything resonates. I got 10 minutes into an hour-long program on autism, and nothing was really relating to me, but the woman said, you know, if you could go back to yourself as a child, what would you say to yourself? And I've always compartmentalized my childhood. When I have any memory of the child, I see it from a third person. I see it looking down on myself, which I think from a sort of trauma therapy is kind of classic.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I thought back to myself as myself, going, if you are gifted and challenged, how does that change your life? And I cried for 45 minutes straight. I literally grieved in that 45 minutes my entire childhood, which I've never done in my life. And then I was just like, well, it was profound. The release was, I'd never felt anything like it. So then I immediately went on and watched the ADHD one, did nothing for me. And then, interestingly, I watched the dyslexic one, and it did nothing for me. So I went back to my model and I told it, you know, I'd related to this is what happened. I said, but it's definitely not dyslexia. And no matter what I did, it kept coming back saying, you've got dyslexia. And I kept going back saying, but I can read and I can write. And what it came back with literally blew my mind. And it said, you're so good at solving problems that you've solved the problem.
Jesus.
That you can't read.
Jesus, Aid.
And it literally.
Wow.
And I was just like, what?
Yeah.
And then it dawned. And then my brain goes, I am that good at pattern recognition that for me,
you've masked your problem.
It's a pattern. It's a pattern.
Yeah.
And but even then, I still didn't believe it. And it's one of those things when it was, you know, in life, the simplest answer is usually the correct one.
There's a term for that.
Yeah. Well, Occam's razor is, yeah. So, and I was just like, wow. And you know, that had a sort of another profound impact on me. So I thought, right, I'm going to speak to somebody who knows me well, but I thought I'm not going to speak to my sister because we're very similar, and I didn't want to potentially her trigger me or me trigger her or anything. And I was still a bit delicate. So I spoke to my brother-in-law, who I've known since the early 90s. And everything I said, he said, it makes perfect sense. You know, there's always been something that, you know, that you've struggled with. And obviously the world has labelled it anxiety. And then the more I looked into this twice exceptional, and that's the point, it's the extremes. So on one hand, you are gifted, but you don't know it. And on the other hand, you struggle with language. And it's that extremes and the conflicts. So when I then started looking into almost the contradictions in me, so I got 99th percentile on extraversion and empathy. I'd done an empathy test at my previous job, and I think I got like 43 out of 45, and most people get in the teens. Yet my withdrawal and my introversion are like 98%. So you go, how can you have such extremes? And all these things just started falling into place, that it's those extreme, not even values, but just how I am, and my body not understanding how to process that has caused all of this.
And living in a world that's not in any way, from the first time you went to school or nursery school, not geared for that.
And this is the thing, that when I sit there and I think about, and one of the other gifts that I've got is memory. And obviously my wife will joke, I just remember everything and anything.
Including anniversary.
Yeah, everything. But it's, for me, I've always dismissed it because it's always been random things. I can't remember telephone numbers in books, but I can just remember these events. And I just remember random crazy things. And it says, obviously, with dyslexia, one of the side effects, the gifts that it gives you, is it gives you increased problem solving, increased memory. Add that onto the fact that I already have an above average, it just then goes to this super level. And then it says, but the fact that you are that gifted and that challenged, but you're off the chart on empathy, they said that's very rare. So again, I started more, I suppose, childhood memories started coming back. And as you alluded to, at school, all the classic things they said to me at school, I just thought, that sounds like autism. That sounds like dyslexia. But again, every time I went through the dyslexia criteria, I was like, it talked about being unorganized, time management. I was like, that's not me. So again, I kept challenging the model. During that, I realized that as a child, I used to tap a lot. I was fidgety. I used to blink a lot. I used to hum a lot. And I thought, that's classic sort of sensory autism.
100%.
And I was like, but I don't do that anymore. And then the penny dropped and went, it's because you started drumming, you started tapping, you started stimming in a socially acceptable way because you just told everyone you were a drummer, right?
Yeah.
And then that absolutely just literally like a cold bath, it just awoke me. And I added that into the profile, and then I kept challenging this dyslexia, and as complicated as my model got, I kept trying to come back to the simplest answers.
Yeah, what's at the core?
Yeah, and it basically just said that there's a thing called stealth dyslexia or hidden dyslexia. And it basically said that, and it's very common with twice exceptional people, because again, you can pattern recognition, you solve the problem. You memorize the shapes of the words. You don't actually use the sort of the language part of your brain. And again, I still was going, am I that good at solving it? Even I don't know I've solved, I've solved it, I've hidden it from myself. So I did the classic of like, well, write me a stealth dyslexic reading test that I can't read, because I can read.
Yeah.
So it said I'm going to use words that are the same shape, the same size, small variations. So if you're doing it based on shape and form, it's going to trip you up. And it wrote me a paragraph. And I got my wife to read it, and she read it.
Yeah.
There's a couple of words she'd never even heard in her life, but she spelled them out. I got 4 words in, and I crashed. Literally, I saw a word I'd never seen before in my life.
My 18-year-old is upstairs.
Yep.
He has an autism diagnosis for something different.
Yep.
Everything you've just said.
Yep.
I've just realized he's probably dyslexic.
Yep.
And neither he nor I know that.
Yep.
Right now, everything you've just discussed,
Yep.
I'm telling you, that kid upstairs who's still asleep at 10 o'clock, I reckon is dyslexic.
Yep.
But he's very, very bright.
Yep.
He's found a way around it, everything. You literally, I'm listening to you, and then the cogs are going click, 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 click.
There's various reasons why specifically I wanted to talk to you, it wasn't just because of this glorious setup. It was because of all these little, and obviously, we've been going through similar journeys. That for me, it would be good to relate to someone else that might also get some enlightenment out of it.
Yeah.
So at that point, it was quite heavy on me. It was quite taxing.
Yeah, I bet.
I trawled the internet, and then that's when I realised that medicine is a tick box exercise. Autism's based on the criteria in it's basically based on Rain Man.
Yeah.
And all of the people that are the professionals, some of them they can't relate, they don't understand. It's just a tick box exercise. So I said to this well-known AI agent, how have I been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder? And it just went, if you've had this conflict in your life, you're going to meet the criteria for generalized anxiety disorder. So then I thought, right, I'm going to step away from this model I've built, and I'm just going to go to Google. I'm going to ask Google a really simple question. And that question is, how would a 50-year-old man who never knew he was twice exceptional, stealth dyslexic, and has sensory autism, how would that impact him? And it listed my life. Literally my life verbatim. Mm-hmm. It was like, imposter syndrome, chronic anxieties, probably been diagnosed with general anxiety, and all of those things. And I was just like, immediately I went, that's why, over a decade of, therapy and all those things did nothing.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't the problem.
Yeah.
So I found a community of other twice exceptional people. And I spoke to somebody who had gone through a similar journey. They'd discovered their twice exceptionality because of their child going through the process. And a lot of it resonated. And she's a coach. So I spoke to her. She says, most people, you figure out in 4 to 6 sessions. So this isn't like, therapy for the rest of your life, which traditional therapy feels like. And within 15 minutes, she said to me, without a shadow of a doubt, you are all the things that you said you think you are, because you now know, more than most people.
And your things, pennies drop, don't they? You see things. Yeah.
Exactly. And I was like, well, what do I do? So she told me about Dabrowski's positive disintegration, and I'd never heard of it.
Not familiar with it.
It's basically what the Matrix is made of. So I sit there. I'm assuming you're aware of the Matrix.
Absolutely.
So I spent my entire life going, what is the Matrix? And that has caused me so much anxiety. And then I've got a glimpse of what the Matrix is. And then I've been at this point where I go, I accept that I am different and these things are true, and I can never go back because it's changed my life.
Yeah.
Or the way modern science is, let's treat all the symptoms and try and push you back down.
Why?
And within 15 minutes, this woman said, that's you. You will never go back. She said, most people that do this end up wanting to help and give back. So most people become a coach. And I was like, what is it about being exactly? And everybody keeps saying,
the universe is speaking.
Well, yes. And this is the, the Bruce Almighty. If you're looking for a sign, this is that sign. And it was weird. So we spoke a lot, but she just sort of reflected and said a lot of things that really resonated with me, that I thought were normal but aren't normal. So I realized that I do bottom down thinking, not top down thinking, which is a very autistic trait. And I realized during that entire 90-minute conversation, my hands, I was stimming like I hadn't stimmed in 50 years. And I was like, oh my God. So I finished the conversation. She's like, start your journey. I'm here if you need me. I had a great night's sleep. The next day I woke up, and for the first time in 4 decades, I just woke up. It was just silent. There was no anxiety. There was nothing. Jesus. And I just thought, this is curious. So literally a lifetime of anxiety cured overnight. And I just thought, my first thought was like, this is witchcraft, right?
It's awareness, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm weirdly superstitious. I'm not religious, and all these. But again, this is all classic things.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, this is strange. And then for the next few days, I saw the world without this anxiety shield around me.
The veneer.
Yeah. And I realized that I was stimming more than I had ever done. I'd obviously just stopped doing it and hidden it. I was aware of, going into supermarkets. It was too bright for me. It was too loud. And I just thought, right, let's acknowledge that.
And embrace the reality of it.
Yeah. So I thought, look, I've got noise cancelling headphones, so I can block that. So, and within the next week, I just sort of proved my theory. And when I spoke to the coach again, she's like, literally after another session, she says, you don't need me anymore. You've made that transition. But she again said the fact that you've got this empathy and that you're male, it's so unusual in this sort of counselling, coaching, therapy world. So I was like, right, so this has been 10 days in my entire life of no anxiety at all. I would start to feel something and I go, no, it's just, this is too bright. I'd start to feel something, go, no, that's too loud. And that awareness just, it was liberating.
It's funny, so I used to coach, and there's one of the things they teach you when you go through any formal training on coaching, and I this is going to sound pithy, but is that often awareness is curative.
Yeah.
And often with coaching, actually the end game is to guide somebody to awareness, and at that point the job is done. Right. And with that awareness comes this lack of the subconscious need to somehow deal with it, mask it.
Because I sat there thinking, because my wife has always been, you're constantly trying to solve the problem, and I was like, well, because I solve problems. It's been my lifelong problem.
You're good at it.
Yeah, I'm good at it, but I couldn't solve that one. And then the I had this kind of realization that it's like, well, you judge it by the impact. A clinician labeling me is not going to change anything. I've made that connection. For me, as you said, the job's done. That awareness has happened. So
does it then become okay, I have this clarity. Now what does that mean going forward? How does that translate to, I said at the intro, how you live your life intentionally, what's left of it? Because it can never be the same.
Yeah.
Right?
So talking to the coach about, I'm at that crossroads, whether I take the blue pill or the red pill.
Yeah.
I was like, if I go back into the corporate world, I know it's not me. There's a reason why I think only 25% of neuro or autistic people are employed. So it literally is the point of either I go down this coaching route, I contact GCHQ to see if I can help them solve some puzzles, or I go back into the corporate world. And I thought, I can go back into the corporate world. I can put on a mask that I'm aware of, not a hidden mask.
At least you're doing it consciously, but that's going to be taxing, right?
And I know
hugely taxing.
Yes, and I know exactly where that road's gonna end. So I was telling a friend who I've known 25 years, same story, and he had some epiphany moments, and then and there I saw things that he'd not seen his entire life. And because I'd known him so long and I remember things, one of my other gifts, I started saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And he was like dismissing it and resisting it. And over the space of, a few conversations over a week, he's had his own epiphany. He's realized that he's got neurodevelopment challenges he's never realised. He realised he 100% had autism, but again, he's hidden it and masked it.
So I think, let me put you on the spot. This is actually quite emotive. I think one of the reasons you're having this conversation with me is because I think you suspect that I may be in a similar sphere. And I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right.
So I suppose the thing that's changed me now. So with my friend, I knew him. So I suppose I had a lot of knowledge. So I had, by chance, and I think someone was trying to help. I don't know whether they wanted me to help their child or their child help me. But I had a conversation with somebody who I knew nothing about, and they had been diagnosed with autism as a child, and they're in their early 20s. But they still have anxiety, they still have all of these horrible things. And they told me things that they hadn't even told their parents. And things that they said to me, I immediately either remembered I did that as a child, and I just connected to them on a way. And bless them, they said, you know, all these doctors, they said, you've got this, this is what you should feel, and this is what you should do. And he said, none of it connected at all. They said, you are the first person that actually saw what I was feeling and saying. And I gave them some advice. Have you tried this? Have you thought about that? And it has fundamentally changed their life.
How many? Jesus. I mean, we're two of us sitting here in our 50s. I'm quite a lot older than you are, but we're different stages of our 50s. But just, this is not about me, but as you know, I've also recently come out of the corporate world, and I did it because I frankly could not bear to wear the mask anymore. You know, I got to a point, and I realized that my entire corporate career, whereas I've been reasonably successful, it's been an act. Yeah, it's just been one big mask. And I came out because I was beginning to see the cracks. Right? I was struggling to maintain that mask, and it was having huge impact in my life outside of that.
Yeah.
How many people like us are sitting there not quite, and here's the thing, we would all accept this as just, you know, Stephen, you're just going through a normal stage of life, and Adie, you're going through, no, it's just normal, right? And I suppose in one way it absolutely is normal, only it's not understood for what it is, right? So how many people are there sitting there who are in need of somebody take away the mask and get them to see themselves? That awareness is curative thing. I'm not, you know.
Well, I know the
who's
statistics.
Focusing on the people over 50, 50s, 60s, 70s, suddenly go, Jesus, that's me, right?
Yeah. So far, everyone I've spoken to has, some have been like, I've been struggling, but I don't know what, I'm going to go back to therapy, or it's been, they're struggling, but they're not ready. I think there's definitely a timing element. And I know arbitrarily from sort of statistics, you know, I know in America they overdiagnose, whereas in this country they underdiagnose. But I think there's a lot of fundamental things, like, you know, we kind of alluded to about the schooling system. It's based on them getting their marks, not about how intelligent you are or anything else about you as a person. So given the age we are, so therefore, you know, we grew up in the 70s and 80s. Therefore, that was the classic, not the unforgotten, that was the previous ones, but, you know, just those things didn't exist. You know, having anything outside of the normal was shamed upon or, you know, or hidden. Yeah. So having that conversation with someone who I knew nothing about, and as they spoke to me, just the things they said, it was so obvious. And I was like, what did you say? And I was like, and you've never thought? It's like, no. And so to have that much of an impact, and again, the penny dropped and just went, I've got all this empathy. People have always told me things they shouldn't tell me in positive and negative ways, in real life, corporate world, everything. And I see these patterns. And now through this new lens of, have you thought about something else? I just thought, that's it. I can't go back into the corporate world.
So I said slightly flippantly earlier, the universe is talking to you. I'm not the universe. But I will say something. You've got to coach, Adie. You've got to
you've got to
do it.
So I went down I looked at, going, I could do a 9-month diploma on, to be a life coach. And I just thought, and this was, and weird, and this was, and again, it wasn't from an arrogance. It was from what's the point in me learning someone else's framework?
It may actually be to your detriment.
Well, and
I actually would be careful. I think it could be. It's like, I can't remember, I'm not going to quote the study, but there was a study, and I think it was in the States, it was years ago, where they took normal people and they said to them, right, you're going to go to this psychiatric unit, and we've told them that you're schizophrenic or something. But just act normal. And they went there and they acted completely normal. And guess what? They were diagnosed formally as having all these, these
because they're looking for the.
So it could be to your detriment to go and learn a set of frameworks that dull your intuition on this.
And this is I was talking to wives, like, the comedian Billy Connolly, he never wrote a thing. Before he went on stage, he just was a bit nervous, took a breath and went out. And it was just, his ability was just naturally funny and could be for 90 minutes, right? And I just thought, what's the point in taking someone through a framework that didn't work for me, didn't work for them? And again, I know it sounds like witchcraft, and for someone that's had imposter syndrome and everything else, to sit there going, what if I do have this gift that people tell me things they shouldn't, and I can make those connections? And I've proved it twice. I then met with someone else, completely different circumstances, and did the same thing again. And I thought, that's 3 times. So I created a website called the Misunderstood Club, because I realized, like me, I never knew what 2E was. So I was never going to search for it. So I tried to solve the problem of, how can I find me, knowing the words that I was looking for, but they were never 2E and they were never dyslexic. So I came up with this idea then of basically, guided discovery for those that don't fit. And obviously for me, things like anxiety and not fitting are my kind of key tenets. That's what I lived my life through. But I can see how, my neurodiverse traits have caused these things, So I go, OCD, it's not OCD, it's a trait of this, Because, technically the AI was like, you've got ADHD traits. And then the more I looked at it, it went, no, you've got hyperfocus because of your intelligence, not because of ADHD. Everything else with ADHD doesn't resonate with me whatsoever. And then I think that's the thing, is that if you are like me, for instance, and again, it feels weird because it sounds like I'm being confident, and I've historically not been a particularly confident person, but I know enough about this that I could tick any box, and I can tick to be diagnosed, I could tick to not be diagnosed, because I know so much about it.
And as the father of an autistic child, although mildly autistic child, he started university this week. There's, when he was younger and first diagnosed, I don't think anybody outread me on this topic of autism, right? Because I'm a reasonably intelligent person, and I did a huge amount of research. And again, it's this propensity to label. This set of things will label that. This set of things will label that. And it's neurodivergence it's hard to label because it is fundamentally different. It's something that's so complex. And maybe there is no such thing as neurodivergence. Maybe because that implies there's a neuronormal, right?
Yeah,
Maybe,
yeah.
maybe there is just we're neuro. That's it, and it's different.
Yeah.
And what frustrates me, I was talking to somebody, a younger friend I have, and she said to me, "Oh, I've just been diagnosed as ADHD and whatever." So, "Oh, you got autism?" No, I've got ADHD. There is the stigma now where people, if you say you're autistic, then there's a problem. People think Rain Man, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas if you think you say ADHD, oh well, half the celebs have ADHD, and it really frustrates me because it denigrates those people who are, I'll use it, neurodivergent, and it's like somehow ADHD is like become a fashionable thing, whereas everything else is like, you're not quite right, my friend, and that's something we need to get over. But I'll go back to the point I made earlier. You don't have to have knowledge, right? You just have to be able to get people to see.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean that and that's from my coaching background, which I've exercised for 20 years, but. That's it. You don't have to have the answers. You just have to get people to see.
Yeah.
And if you've never seen that yourself, it's kind of hard to know how to get somebody to see it.
Yeah.
It's it's profound.
It has completely rewritten my life.
Yeah.
So one of the byproducts of that is that and on the last session with my coach, she said, just let your, now you found the right key.
Yeah.
Just let your brain do its thing.
Yeah.
So it is literally in the background constantly going through my entire life, taking every memory and
re-looking as we talk,
re-looking at it through a new lens and reshaping it, which means I'm exhausted. So my cognitive ability has gone down. Really fascinating, and my wife has observed it. So unprompted, I can't even spell simple words now, just because my cognitive ability it's just gone. It's busy processing my life, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. Because I'm, it's just working on something else. And I was like, have I lost it? And it's like, no, it's just busy. And my actual brain has forgotten most words. And they're all simple words. And I just thought, this is fascinating that I'm so tired because my cognitive load is so high that my brain's gone, well, you don't need to hide that anymore. Let's just stop.
Can you imagine the energy focused expenditure of those masks that you've created, that you're it's like lead plates you're spinning and have been doing, it's
for 50 years.
And again, I recognize this, my son, to cope, he has these masks and they're hugely draining.
Initially I just thought I could relate most to 40, 50-year-old men who are in the same situation. But I've also spoken to, as I said, I spoke to someone who's in their 20s, who's female, I know nothing about. And actually, in terms of their relationship with anxiety and their relationship to the world has changed just from the conversation. So this the misunderstood club that I've created, it's just about that, having a conversation with someone to try and see if there's something that's been staring them in the face. Because I think, as you kind of said before, the world likes to label. And so I know now that anxiety disappears overnight. That wasn't generalized anxiety disorder. So just all the traits of my neurodivergence has kind of manifested in the perfect storm of tick boxes that I get diagnosed.
We also have this kind of this addiction to causality. What I mean is it's the same with medicine, right? I've got a pain, right? You take a tablet, right? Well, what caused the pain. That's
Yeah.
probably where, and that's where
Yeah.
functional medicine's going. That's probably where we need to look at. And it's the same with, you know, diagnosis and whether that, there's an CBT or medication doesn't really matter. Whatever. It's like, well, where did it come from?
Yeah, the root cause.
Because I surmise from what you said, there's no treatment that was made for your anxiety that had anything to do with where it was stemming from.
Yeah, and I think that's a mindset as well, is that, you know, obviously in the news today about Trump, they're saying that if you have paracetamol, you know, it's just like, well, this is the thing. There's not, you know, it's like, well, you can't tell now, but I've got curly hair. You have straight hair. Doesn't mean my hair's wrong. It just grew in a slightly different direction. So actually, for me, there is nothing to treat. The thing to treat was, as you said, that, well, I think first and foremost, acceptance and awareness. So after a month, I built a framework to talk to my sister. So she is, I would say, academically gifted, unbelievable. And I had to build this framework, which was like, I'm not asking for support or judgment or approval. I'm just telling you to protect myself in case she dismissed it, for instance. And she cried and she said, it explains everything. She's literally was like, you're the most, she said, you're the smartest person I've ever met. You've never not solved this, that, and the other, you know. And she said, it makes absolute perfect sense. And that for me was like the absolute,
there's your epiphany, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that was the ultimate validation, because she said, "Oh, I remembered, you know, this when you were a kid."
Wow.
And I was just like, I'd forgotten I did that, and I added that, and it was like, oh my God, and then literally it was like, there's no way you can come back from this.
Yeah.
But there's lots of little things I've realised, like, not that eye contact's uncomfortable. I've always thought I'm a visual person, so I kind of look off. But there's, you know, all these little things are now coming back, right? That I'd forgotten that at some point I'd have been shamed or told off for doing, and I just, you know, and it still blows my mind now thinking that, you know, for 40 years it's been so autonomous in my system that I'm not even aware I'm doing it. But as you 100% said, and I think that's why it hits people in their 40s and 50s, that you spent 4 decades.
Tiring, man.
You haven't got the energy. Yeah. And I think that's why it's hitting, and I think that's why he talks about, there's a lot in the news about ADHD women who are getting diagnosed at this age. I think because they hit the menopause and then that natural stress tips them over. Yeah. Whereas men, I think they get for that sort of the midlife crisis work bit, and then that triggers it from that perspective.
And it's, I mean, we'll continue this conversation, both here and in private. There's this conversation is getting me to rethink a lot that I've thought about. So you know, again, I knew I had to get out of the stage whatever I was in, and that did come in the last couple of months with a lot of awareness. I've realized, and I'm quite ashamed of this, that I've always needed to be liked. And to a degree that's very unhealthy. So you know, I'm lucky I was, at least at school, labeled with a high IQ. I'm labeled as smart, and you know, and I've believed that for whether wasn't a consequence of that. But so I've always wanted to be right, because you know, I went to boarding school at 12, and that's how you survived. You know, you were right in class and you were liked outside of class. And where did that come from? You know, where does that, and it's and again, if I go back to when I introduced this podcast, it is truly about how we live and engage life for what's left of our lives, right? This should be the best part of our lives. And I mentioned a whole lot of things that are relevant, but I'd say not as far underneath the bit of the iceberg that's under the water. You know, things like how we continue to grow, how we continue to learn, starting new careers, starting new businesses, as I'm doing at 58. But Jesus, it'd be helpful if we got to know who we truly are in this moment, right? And
Exactly.
and I think it is. And I know you quite rightly said, you know, you it's not just about people over 50. You've spoken to people younger, and I'd like you to talk to Sam at some point as well. But there's a whole lot of us who are over 50 who don't quite understand why we're wrestling with ourselves, and it's and it's probably an element of we're fucking tired of wearing masks and carrying these things around. It's like it's hard work, man.
Yeah,
and really hard work.
There's a big. I spoke to another couple of people at the gym who have, again, gone through similar things, changed careers, and a lot of them seem to be focusing on, you know, they've reconciled it in their brain of just going, you know, it's midlife crisis. I've done the family man, the corporate man. Now I'm going to do what I want, and they've done it as a sort of the menopause. But I think it's
that's not the reason.
No,
is it?
no,
it's no. And I've just done exactly the same thing, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's only now I've realized in this conversation that actually I haven't understood why it is.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm doing this, and it would be bloody helpful and liberating
to
personally
figure out,
if you know I could get that level of awareness. I'll use the word again. It is awareness.
Yeah, because you know I'm in a similar position in that my youngest has gone to university, so you know we're empty nesters, so I don't need to do the corporate world anymore. But for me, it's just, again, you know, to work for shareholders and everyone else's benefit. I think it's been 20 years since I worked for a corporate that I actually genuinely agreed with their values, and they were nice. You know, the company was nice. So now thinking I can spend the rest of my life genuinely helping people like me, and then I get quite emotional thinking, oh, you know, if I can help me as a 10-year-old. Oh, you know, that's fundamental.
Wow.
And I think, again, the thing for me is, weirdly, I can just see it. Whereas, you know, as the girl that I spoke to, she's like, no one else can relate to it.
Yeah. We definitely need to do this again, right? As I said earlier, we're going to talk off air, right? But we're going to talk on air as well. There's a lot to unpack here, Adie. There's so much. I think, and I'm looking at myself, but I'm looking at my cohort, right? People in their 50s and beyond, and I'm even 60s and 70s, and I'm going, you know, we get to this moment, as we've just said, where it's kind of accepted that you feel you're tired of the corporate world or whatever, but why? And I just think it is utter fatigue.
Yeah.
And you talked about grieving for the younger you. Side segue. I had clinical depression in my 20s, and unless you've had depression like that, people don't understand it. It's not feeling sad. It's not being able to get out of bed.
Yeah.
I mean, and people go, well, just sit up and put your feet on the floor. You can't. You literally cannot. And they say depression is often grief.
Yeah.
It's grief for your former self.
Yeah.
You know, and I wonder how many people who get diagnosed with depression 50 and over, because that is escalating the incidence of it. How much of that is actually grief, perhaps for the person they've never been allowed to be?
Yeah. So this the positive disintegration is that anxiety and depression are all positive things, right? If you get an extension on your house, there's going to be carnage in your house while your extension.
Yeah.
The world at the moment willingly wants to get you to hide those symptoms with medication or therapy or hard work and effort, and go back to conforming, right?
Yeah.
So let's reframe your clinical depression and call it something else and see if it feels better calling it something else.
Yeah.
So for instance, call it autistic burnout.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same symptoms, same
or
everything.
Even more benignly, it's just like you have mask fatigue.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, literally, you can't carry this external persona anymore.
Yeah.
And I think as well, it's like, how many of us spend so much of our time quietly, privately ashamed?
Yeah.
Because we're not presenting who we truly are. Now, listen, we all have things we don't want to present to the world anyway. That's human nature, right? But I just think there is, and I'm one of, there's so many people out there who don't realize that they're not being true to who
they're not
fundamentally are.
Yeah. And just like the Matrix, they don't know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you said it, because on my sort of lists of keywords that I would have used to have found me, there's that, you know, the misunderstood, the anxious, but there is the, you know, I always jokingly said, you know, I've got enough guilt in me. I don't need religion to add to that. But all the words that you use, you know, shame, guilt, all those things are, for me, they have all been chapters in my life that are quite prominent. And then, I suppose the ultimate irony, I've started writing a book of my journey, using technology, obviously, so I'm voice dictating it all. Because I would just realise
it may be quicker that way.
Well, because that was one of the things I realised, that I can read, I can write, but I can't. My handwriting is atrocious. Everyone was like, "You should be a doctor."
My mother was a doctor, so mine's appalling.
Yeah, but actually, 50% of the time I can't even read my own writing, which is a classic.
But that's me. I can't. I journal.
Yeah.
And I go back today. I'll go back to yesterday, and sometimes I can't decipher what I've written.
Yeah.
Jesus, you know.
Welcome.
When I was at school at about age 16, they asked me to stop writing in cursive writing.
Yeah.
They asked me to print.
Yeah.
I've just remembered this.
Yeah.
And I've printed ever since, but my printing has become, you know, it's illegible. So,
so I originally thought I had dysgraphia. So if dyslexia is the reading element, dysgraphia is basically the writing element.
My son struggles to write.
So, but the side effects, the criteria for that is the, you know, time management, disorganized, can't do directions, navigations. And I was like, but that's not me.
But it's him.
Stealth dyslexia, where it overlaps, all those things in the middle, you've perfectly good handwriting. You can hide the fact you can't read well enough. And it's like it all came down, and it was basically the unlegible handwriting, because again, there's a phonics element in your brain that just that doesn't work. So I was just like, oh my God. And I think there's you know, like, everyone that commits suicide has depression, but not everyone that has depression has suicide. There's that sort of twisted correlation between if you've got autism, then you're very likely to have, you know, you're twice as likely to have one of the others, and vice versa. But again, I think for me, this is if my brain is wired to see big systems and make the connections that others can't, you know what I mean? My brain there makes that logical of solving the problem. Of going, it's not just this, it's that.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap. Absolutely love it. Brilliant. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Jesus. Yeah. You said it would blow my mind. You were right, man. It's quite emotive, because I think I have a lot of emotion coming in the next 3 days, because I think there's some things that I'm entering my mind. I'm actually quite frightened to go and look at, but I know I'm going to have to.